Hello and welcome to Navigating Complex Standards with AI, a webinar from the Wireless Innovation Forum. Today we have with us myself, John Glossner, the WInnForum CEO. We also have Andrew Clegg from Valo Analytica. He's the WInnForum CTO and the chair of the AI Working Group. We have Richard Bernhardt from WISPA, who is the WInnForum president and the chair of the CBRS committee, and Peter Young from ComSearch, who is a board member and the chair of the 6 GHz committee. So we're looking forward to having a nice discussion today on how we use AI to help navigate our specifications. So with that, thank you, and I'll begin. So the Wireless Innovation Forum is a nonprofit organization, and we operate under a trade association model. We have a very broad and diverse global membership, uniting pretty much everyone from the wireless ecosystem, everyone from component vendors through equipment vendors, subsystems, software, network providers, and including even R&D organizations, universities, and government users, government agencies, and regulators. This gives us a wide representation of perspectives. We have a unifying mission of advancing technologies, supporting the innovative utilization of spectrum and the development of wireless communication systems, including essential or critical communication systems. One of the important aspects of the Wireless Innovation Forum is that we are a neutral, consensus-driven forum. We provide an impartial environment to allow the industry to reach consensus on important specifications and technology topics. We are primarily technology focused, and we do that by looking at technical solutions to various regulatory rulings, requests throughout the world. We are a standards best practice organization. We produce specifications, technical reports, and occasionally regulatory input to help guide the technology of various either requests for notices or consultations. The one thing we probably do best is once a set of rules are codified by a regulatory agency, we come together and we turn those into a set of specifications that our members can actually implement, allowing interoperability generally between all of the different participants. So with that, that's the introduction. Now I want to let you know about the technology that we're using today for this webinar. We will make all the slides available shortly after the webinar. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. But most importantly, during this webinar, you can submit questions. You'll see in your interface that you have this questions box, and we will relay them to the presenter at the time. If you ever have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. This is my email, but it's also on the website and it's very easy to find. So with that, I'd like to introduce our CTO, Andy Clegg, who's going to give you a technical overview of what his working group has been doing.
All right. Hey, thanks, John. So yeah, we're getting to the meat of what we're here for today, to give you a new offering, a better way to query our standards. So why would you use AI to interface with the WInnForum standards? So the idea here is, consider that our CBRS standards or our 6 GHz automated frequency coordination standards are, it's not just a single document. Each of those set of standards is multiple documents consisting of hundreds or almost 1,000 pages each of material that explain exactly how CBRS is implemented or how 6 GHz AFC is implemented. If you had a question about the standards or you had a question about how CBRS operates, you would, in theory, you'd have to read all of those documents and all of those pages to make sure you capture everything, because there's various aspects of the operations that are scattered across all of those different documents. And so it's kind of daunting to read through all of that material just to answer what may be a very specific question. So the solution here actually is a utility called NotebookLM. which will explain what NotebookLM is here in a moment. But what it allows you to do is to issue plain language queries about our standards and get plain language responses drawn directly from the standards, giving you, what should be a correct answer, but doing it without having to read all hundreds or 1,000 pages of the standards in order to get your question answered. The AI looks across all of the documents, all of the pages of all of the documents simultaneously, and synthesizes its response based upon the totality of the material that's in the standard. So that's its tremendous benefit. So next slide, please, John. John, there we go. Okay, so what is NotebookLM? So NotebookLM is actually a Google utility. It's a Google product, and it is what they refer to as a source-grounded AI utility. So by grounded, what that means is the answer that you get to your query is going to be based only on the documents that are that comprise that notebook. So when we create a notebook, we upload a set of documents to it, and when you query, it only uses those documents to find the answer. So, for example, our CBRS notebook consists of a curated collection of our CBRS standards and related documents, and I'll explain in a moment, how we curated them. And the 6 GHz notebook consists of the WInnForum 6 GHz AFC standards plus other related material that's also been curated to make sure that you get the right answers. So again, the answers you get are based only on the content of the material provided to the notebook, which should significantly reduce what people refer to as hallucinations, getting just crazy wrong answers. So what it's not doing is going out to the broad internet and looking across every document that's ever been published about CBRS and 6 GHz and trying to find an answer. Because if you do that, you'll find a lot of good material, but you'll also find a lot of bad material. You'll find a lot of confusing material. You'll find a lot of wrong material. You'll find a lot of conflicting material. And that's what leads to the hallucinations, giving you answers that are way off track. So instead, it's basing its answers only on our particular standards. The way we curate the documents that we include in the notebooks is that we use all of our balloted standards for that particular thing. So all of our balloted CBRS standards go into the CBRS notebook, and all of our balloted 6 GHz AFC standards go into the notebook. And by balloted, what we mean is all of the members of WInnForum have to review and approve the particular document before it's published. So it's an output of a committee. It's output of a lot of work from a lot of members of WInnForum. And then the entire WInnForum membership is given the opportunity to review those documents, comment on them, correct any errors, etc., and then approve them. So what you're getting, what's part of the notebook, is only balloted documents. So it means it's been thoroughly vetted by all of the WInnForum membership before it goes out the door. Another good thing about the NotebookLM utility, which is different from typical AI, like if you just use Gemini or ChatGPT directly, without using the notebook feature, it gives you citations to where it found the particular answer. So when it gives a response to your query, there will be embedded in line little references that you can click on. It'll tell you exactly which paragraph or which document it found that material in. So you can go back and check its work, which is also a very powerful utility. It also helps you, make sure that the answer that you're getting is correct, because you can go back and review. And by the way, NotebookLM, in the big picture, it's based upon Google's Gemini large language model, but again, it only draws its answers, its responses to your query from the material that we actually put into the notebook. It's very powerful. It's a great utility. We've made a lot of use out of it. I've used it over the last almost 3 months now for a lot of the work I've been doing. And, I chaired the committees that created the CBRS foundational standards, and I can tell you that it has never given me a crazy wrong answer, and it has been incredibly useful, even to me, who I feel like I know the standards well, but honestly, having this utility has been a huge benefit in asking specific questions about the standards and getting clear responses. So next slide, please, John. So a few notes about the use of NotebookLM. So you do need a Gmail or other Google account to be logged in to use the NotebookLM utility. This is not a WINForum requirement. We have nothing to do with this authentication process. This is just Google making sure you're logged into Google before you use a Google utility. So we have nothing to do with that. That's just a Google requirement. So you can create a throwaway Gmail account if you don't have a Google account, or you can use your work account if you have, if your work is hosted on Google, whatever. You can use your private Gmail account, whatever. You just need some Google account to log in to use NotebookLM. And again, this has nothing to do with WINForum. This is just a Google requirement. A really good benefit of this is that the queries that you put into the notebook are private to you. WINForum does not receive any record of queries that are entered into our notebooks. We don't even know who is accessing our notebooks. We don't get a list of email addresses or names or anything of people who have accessed the notebooks. We don't get any record of queries entered or people who have accessed them. So if you're, thinking, just as an example, thinking of a new business centered around the CBRS standards or CBRS ecosystem, and you need to understand certain aspects of the standards, and you can go and you can query these notebooks, and nobody will be able to suss out what business you're planning, because nobody is getting a record of the queries that you're putting in there. So that's a really big benefit, that nobody sees the queries that are entered, other than you. You do get a record of your own queries, but we do not. WINForum does not get a record. We have to say that, as with all AI applications, the model is, could possibly give incorrect information. So, if you're using it for something critical, please double check. Of course, having the references in line there will make it easier for you to check those things. Again, I can tell you I've been using it extensively for almost 3 months, particularly the CBRS notebook. I have not found any wrong answers. The only time it gave me an answer that I wasn't expecting, it turned out the misunderstanding was on my part, not on its part. It gave the correct answer. So that's very encouraging. We're not aware of other wireless standards groups that have made their work products available for querying using AI in this way. We'd really appreciate hearing about any standards groups, wireless or otherwise, that you know of that may be making their standards available through AI queries, because we'd like to learn, share best practices with other groups. So if you know of any, we'd really appreciate hearing about that. We also encourage feedback on the utility. We have a standard WINForum feedback form that's linked on the slide. So if you have an issue with the notebook, or you like it or you don't like it, or there's something you'd like to change about it, please let us know. Although it is a Google utility, so fundamentally we can't really change the features of how it works, but we might be able to provide some assistance or include other documentation that you think should be in there. If you have an issue with a particular query or a response you got from a query, we would need you to copy and paste the query and the response into the feedback form, because again, we do not get any record of queries entered or responses provided. So you'll have to make sure that you provide the query and the response if you've got a question about a particular thing. So next slide, please, John. Okay, so how do you get to the WINForum CBRS document suite? So we put a link there, and then in a minute when we do the demo, John will show you how you can get to it through the WINForum homepage. But there is a link to our cover page to the query utility there at the top of the slide here. So as I mentioned, for the CBRS notebook, it contains most of the balloted CBRS publications. So it's a total of 28 documents, 982 pages worth of material. And it covers release 1 and release 1 plus CBRS standards. So out of those 28 documents, we have 13 of those are technical specifications, so TSs we call them, actual standards. 5 of them are technical reports that have additional detail, for example, encumbrances in the CBRS band, the incumbents that you have to work around, where they're located, things like that. We have policies and procedures documents about how CBRS band operates, how SASs communicate with each other, and things like that. We have some recommendation documents that we've created. We also have one other document, which I believe is a webinar that we did on CBRS. You can get the complete list of documents that's included in the notebook by going to that link that's listed there, or you can ask the notebook itself. When you go to the notebook, you can say, please list all of the documents that are in this notebook, and it'll spit out the list of documents. Now, the things that we did not include in here are CBRS related balloted material that we did not include in this. Are things like comments that WInnForum filed in the FCC CBRS proceeding as it developed over the years. And the reason we didn't include that is a lot of that stuff is sort of what we hoped would happen in the CBRS ban, sort of forward-looking thoughts about how we thought the FCC should develop rules for the CBRS ban. And not everything that we asked for or suggested was eventually adopted. So we did not want to confuse the answers that you may get with sort of forward-looking statements that may or may not have ever come true that we may have filed in CBRS comments. So we did not include those type of documents. The documents we included are things that are basically final and done and actually part of the currently operating CBRS ecosystem. The other thing we didn't include is our Release 2 standards. For those of you that are familiar, we do have a Release 2 series of standards that add additional functionalities to the CBRS band. So for example, it provides the ability for SASs to start taking into account down tilt of antennas when calculating interference and things like that. The reason we did not include the Release 2 standards is that no SAS and no ESC equipment or SAS or CBRS equipment vendor have implemented Release 2 features. So no SAS or CBSDs actually implement Release 2 yet. So we didn't want to cloud your responses in the notebook with things that have not been implemented by anybody yet. So we do not have Release 2 standards in the CBRS notebook. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of curation that went on to developing the documents. Next slide, please, John. Same thing for 6 GHz AFC. So in this case, WInnForum and Wi-Fi Alliance collaborated on creating the 6 GHz AFC standards. So for that reason, in our notebook, we have both the WInnForum balloted standards as well as the Wi-Fi Alliance balloted standards are included in the notebook to give you a complete answer. Typically, the WInnForum material has more to do with the automated frequency coordination system itself, and the Wi-Fi Alliance standards have more to do with the device standards and requirements. So together, that gives you a view of the entire ecosystem. In the CBRS world, Wi-Fi or WInnForum did both of those sets of standards. Here, it was sort of bifurcated between WInnForum and Wi-Fi Alliance, but the Wi-Fi Alliance documents are in our WInnForum notebook with the permission of the Wi-Fi Alliance. So there we have 18 documents total. I forget what the total page count is across all of the documents. So we have 18 WInnForum documents. We have 8 Wi-Fi Alliance documents. We have 2 webinar presentations included. So we have 28 documents there as well. Same number of documents as CBRS, just coincidentally, but gives you an idea of the scale. And again, the complete list of documents for the 6 GHz notebook is available at the link there on the slide, or you can ask the notebook itself to give you a list of the documents. So that hopefully gives you. So we do have a question before I move on to the demo. We have a question. Says WInnForum does not get queries or responses. How about being shared outside of WInnForum? As far as we know, the only possible recipient of the queries that go into it would be Google itself. But honestly, that's beyond us as to what Google may do with that material. I doubt Google is scraping it, looking for competitive CBRS positions to be in. As far as we know, Google may use it to improve its products and services, but beyond that, we really don't know. We do have another comment. Let's see, this may be of interest. Last fall, NYU Wireless showed a demo of an application that queries 3GPP documents, which would be great because 3GPP documents are even more complex than CBRS. We had discussions about whether it could trace back to contributions and arguments that led to a certain part of the spec. It might be instructive to compare notes. Yeah, so that's very good. So we will we'll contact NYU Wireless and see what their experiences have been with 3GPP. I don't know. I didn't get input as to whether 3GPP was involved in that experiment or not. But that's very. I've thought about personally making a personal notebook with 3GPP standards because those are very complex. So that's good to know that NYU Wireless experimented with it. So good. So let's move on to the demo of actually using the notebook, which is really pretty trivial to do this. And so we're first going to move over to Richard Bernhard, who's our CBRS committee chair. And John will also show on the screen how to get to the CBRS notebook from the WInnForum homepage. So take it away, Richard and John.
Hey, everybody. Welcome and thank you for coming today. And thank you, Andy, for the overview. I think you'll find this tool really useful. I want to walk you through with John how you get to find the query tool. You would start on the front page of our website at wirelessinnovation.org. And then you'll see in the front there are a bunch of buttons. One is for 6 gigahertz, the next one is for CBRS, and so forth. Since we're reviewing 6 gigahertz and CBRS today, we'll take it to CBRS. Now you're on the section that shows all of the information that we have about CBRS, and up on the right-hand side, you will see a drop-down menu that says CBRS Standards AI Query. We'll tap on that. And now you're into the AI background and you'll see a button. We're very button driven here. You'll see an AI query button there. Let's go ahead and press that button and it'll set us up for looking at queries. Now, if you have done a query before with us, if you've used this system before, you may see a history showing up there where it says chat. It preserves your history to you. As Andy said before, none of that is transmitted to WInnForum or elsewhere, but your particular queries may show up there, and that's a value to you if you want to see what you did last, or if you're doing continuing work and you want to look back on what you just did, maybe to refine your search or otherwise. So what we want to do today is, we're doing this live, is to take a look at a couple of questions and see how the system responds to that. But before we do the first one, I want to tell you, some of you may be a little bit confused between what is a standard, what's a specification, what's a technical report. WInnForum creates standards that are parallel to existing regulatory material. So if the FCC comes out with a report and order that basically is the rules for a particular use, so in CBRS it's part 96, we trace those to the standards that we do. And once it's been validated and approved by the WInnForum, that standard is posted live to our website, and members and others outside can see those standards. A standard and a specification are technically the same thing. So if you hear us use the word specification or you hear us use the word standard, we're talking about the same reference. If you hear us talking about a technical report, that's an analysis of some of the technology that's out there. It's not taking a particular position on anything. It's not setting something up for a particular rule, but it is providing background and information on technical aspects. You may also periodically see, and these are not at this point included in this analysis, something called a white paper, and that's a particular company providing either a technologic or an overview background that they publish themselves. You will not find those in these query responses. So let's take a look at how this system works. John, if we could type in the words, do I have to use a certified professional installer, or a CPI in parentheses, to install my CBSD. A CBSD is the unit of radio device that's used in the CBRS ecosystem. And you'll see that it can take anywhere from 10 seconds to maybe 30 seconds or even a minute if it's a very complex question to go through all of those documents that Andy mentioned, the 928 pages of material, and it starts to put out information that you can use on that subject. And in this case, it's talking about what you do with a CPI with a category B device, what you would do with one with a category A device, where a CPI is not required because a CPI isn't required in every circumstance, and other information that may be useful to you. Now, you may decide when you get this result back that this is not refined enough for you, that you want to clarify. And that's why it's good to see this record printed from what you've done prior. You could then go in and clarify that and say, in certain circumstances, for example, do I need one to install for category B, or do I need to install for category A? Or what about low power devices, end user devices? You could clarify the question however you like, and in short periods of time, it will search through those 928 pages of specifications and technical reports and provide you with the information. Let's take a look at another one. So if we were, for example, curious as to how to how restricted things would be when we're using CBRS, would there be an occasion where we might actually have to turn off a radio? Let's ask a question about that. What determines whether my CBSD is turned off during Navy radar activity? So Navy is one of the incumbents, and we're trying to decide whether or not there's a period of time or an activity that happens that would require me to either move to another channel or change my power or do something in that respect. And so again, it searches through these documents. You can see it kind of looking at it, and it will give us a response. And in each one of the lines that it gives us a response, I'm going to point this out in just a moment. You see the response coming in as we speak. At the end of each line, you see some numbers and some letters. If you were to tap on those, they give you, as John has just indicated, they give you the resource that was used in order to give you that response. So just as in a legal brief or anything else where they always give you the source as to where the statement comes from, the NotebookLM query provides you with exactly that same resource. And again, you may find that this is not exactly what you were looking for. You didn't phrase the question correctly, or maybe you want something more detailed. You can then either re-ask the question again with a little more detail or restructure the question. And again, it will give you a response that's tailored to your query with the specific references that you need. Once again, let's take a look at what would happen, for example, if we're working outside the United States or we're working inside the United States but near a border. So my CBRS network, this is the next query. My CBRS network is near the Canadian border, period. How does this impact my operation? That's my question relative to the inquiry about the Canadian border. Again, it references those documents. And as I'll indicate a little bit later when we go through what the process will be for the future, you will note that if anything were to change in either the rules or our specifications, these documents would be updated. So there's a question that's asking whether or not you can click through and reach the document in the citation. It's a very good question. It will show you the reference. I'm not sure if you can click through. Let's give it a try. John, will you go up to one of those and see if it'll take you from there to the document? Is it possible to do that, or do you have to go to the document itself?
Yes, so you cannot click. Okay, so the way we make this available to the public is through read-only access to this particular notebook, which restricts the people from editing, or in this case, viewing the documents themselves. That's a restriction of Google. That's not a restriction from WInnForum. But given the reference, and it'll tell you which document that the reference comes from, you can, if you have the WInnForum website available, you can get to that document through our standards page. So the short answer is the document is always going to be available to you because only published standards are comprised here, and the reference will tell you which document it came from, but you will have to go to the WInnForum website to access that document directly. The utility in read-only mode does not allow you to directly access the document, unfortunately. So, and again, that's a Google limitation. We'd love to have it different, but that's what it is right now.
So thank you, Andy. And one thing that I will say is that all of the documents that are referenced here, because they are included in this notebook, are available. Just it takes a little extra effort. Maybe open a second window with the baseline standards listed on the right side and their query on the left, and then you can kind of go back and forth with those. And again, you'll see here's what some of the responses are to the question about the border question. Protection of Canadian FSS sites, and how the SAS coordinates it. And again, each one of these have their reference points. Let's try one more, and then we'll move into 6 gigahertz. So what we're trying to show you here is that there are different perspectives that you can take on your search, or your query. I should call it a query. And let me identify the difference between a query and a search. Many of you, all of us for that matter, are used to using search engines. Search engines may take from many different sources and points of view and reference, and they give you a weighted response, usually back from your inquiry. A query in a NotebookLM only examines the documentation that it's provided with. So it's an isolated environment, and you're not getting outside information which could contaminate the results or could give you false information or false weighting. There's no weighting in this sense, though it does analyze the document for the type of question and query you're providing. That's the difference between a search and a query. So let's go on to one more. This would be from the perspective of an operator who is seeking to find out what happens if he's receiving interference. So let's ask that question. What do I do if my CBSD is receiving interference? And you can imagine that how much time it would take to go through each one of the documents and reference this stuff in order to find the exact answer. So the ability to do this is really helpful. And NotebookLM is pretty good at giving you outlines, so you can look at topic areas. You can then ask additional queries relative to those topic areas and get more depth if that's what you want. But as it's telling you here, there's many different ways to deal with interference. One of them is to cooperate with the operators that are in the field. You may utilize the SAS, the Spectrum Access System, who does do some coexistence work, especially between PALs and other operators, or PALs and PALs. And you could report interference to the SAS itself. And you could try and understand the type of interference and rights and protections that there are. So while GAA to GAA does not provide specific interference protection through the SAS still might be able to help you, and there might be other methods that you can use. Again, you can dig in deeper into these as you go. Now you can see in just a couple minutes, we've taken things from the perspective of the operator, the installer, affecting things with the incumbents, to what do I do if there's interference? And these are just a few queries that you can do across nearly 1,000 pages. I want to show you that this operates the same in our other standards. So I'm pleased to introduce Pete Young, who's going to walk you through how these things work with the 6 gigahertz band. Pete?
Thanks, Richard. So as Andy mentioned previously, the NotebookLM contains documents, standards, procedures, and policies, along with a couple webinar PowerPoint presentations. And similar to CBRS, the 6 gigahertz notebook is also limited to just these Wi-Fi Alliance and WInnForum documents. As such, the FCC rules governing AFC and standard power devices, as well as the proceedings that are in the FCC, are not included in this notebook. So to that end, questions about who the AFC approved operators are, or when they were approved, is not going to be a question that can be answered by this notebook. And John, I don't know if we need to run through to the 6 gigahertz side and show how to get to that, going through the site here, but this some high-level questions that someone may ask includes things such as current events, like questions on building entry loss, or how a device or AFC may be approved, or an AFC can be approved or certified in the US, are sort of questions that our documents can answer. It is also a good tool to generate AFC inquiry JSON files to submit to an AFC if you wanted to do a very specific question. So, so for like the first question, John, would be, what is WInnForum's recommended value for building entry loss? Keep in mind that no FCC documentation is used to produce these results. So therefore, the waivers that current AFC providers have been given is not going to be provided, as well as who those approved waiver people are. So what it does come back with is what the standards say, which is building entry loss is expected to be 20.5 dB, and where it's applied. There is some background documentation in the FCC as to how 20.5 dB was attained and where that came from. It was actually something that came from the FCC originally in the order, but that was not what was actually, the FCC allowed it by waiver. So that kind of information, because it came from the FCC, is not necessarily something that comes in.
Peter, we did get a good question related to what you just said a minute ago. So the question is there a reason why the FCC documents aren't in here? There is. So remember that WInnForum can only control WInnForum documents. We can't control anybody else's documents. So we have to be very careful about putting non-WInnForum material in this notebook if we're representing this as something that WInnForum has vetted. We are going to have a discussion about whether we could put, for example, FCC rules, reports and orders, things like that in here, because even though those aren't WInnForum documents, those, you could consider those coming from the government being carefully vetted and things like that. So we might start putting things in there. What we have to be careful about is if you put, for example, all of the comments filed in a 6 gigahertz proceeding or something like that in here, when you ask a question, it's going to start getting clouded by, what other people thought. There may be people who said building entry loss should be 40 dB and people who said it should be 0. And so you ask the question that Pete just asked, and it may give you a weird response or a variety of responses, but that's not what the AFCs actually use. The AFCs actually use 20.5 unless there's some other extenuating circumstances. We want it to give you what's actually used and what's actually part of the standard, rather than being clouded by a lot of discussions in the comments on the FCC proceedings. So short answer is we may put the relevant part 15 rule parts in the 6 gigahertz thing and the relevant part 96 rules into the CBRS notebook. That's a discussion that we're going to have, but I don't think we'll ever put comments, maybe even waiver requests. We probably will shy away from putting those into the notebooks.
Okay, thanks, Andy, for that clarification. I appreciate you jumping in there. That was something I was going to bring up. The next question for consideration within, as an AFC provider myself, we get these questions all the time. These are some of the things that I thought I'd ask. The next question is, what are the high-level steps for my company to get my standard power device approved for use in the United States? This is something that, given how nascent this service is, like it's just still getting started. There's a lot of equipment manufacturers that are trying to get their devices approved for use in the United States using standard power, and it's not necessarily easy to find where to go and what the procedures are to get devices approved. Some of the things that are required is obviously to make sure your devices are actually functional, that they actually follow the protocols. So there's protocol and compliance testing, there's RF and emissions testings. Interesting, this response is very different yet similar to what we have in our have run previously. But in general, it goes through the protocol compliance testings, RF and emissions testing, preparing declarations and internal reports, and then submission to a TCB for authorization, and then it becomes granted. So it does provide a lot of details for you to get started. Again, every time I've asked this question of the LM just to see how it varies, there's going to be varying responses in how it actually comes up with the answer. So you will want to check those references and make sure that they are in fact accurate in terms of what that process is. In many ways, once you actually find out, oh, here's step one, you're going to be able to reach out to a test lab, a TCB that is approved, a telecommunications certification body, and they've done this before, so they may be able to help you get the right processes and make sure you're doing things in the right order. Moving on to the next question. If I wanted to be an AFC provider, I may ask, what are the high-level steps for my company to get approved in the US as an AFC provider? The initial 7 approved AFC operators went through this process, as well as the other 2 that have subsequently come online. Although it took a lot longer for the initial 7 because we were still developing the test procedures and test vectors and responses and all that, and getting that approved by the FCC. So, but in general, the high level steps are to you submit your proposal to the FCC. It goes into public comment on that, and then the FCC issues a conditional approval. And then you would go through your laboratory testing, and then followed by a public trial. In many ways, that lab testing and the public trial can be done in parallel. And then the public trial allows the public to basically get in and ask and vet the AFC that it's going to provide results. And then once that process is complete of the public trial and your lab testing, that report gets submitted to the FCC, and the FCC provides the final approval. Another question, very much more specific, I enjoy this mainly because it makes it easy for me to do, is if I wanted to find out what the JSON request format should look like for a specific type of request, I can ask, write an AFC available spectrum inquiry request. John, this is the next question. Okay, he's copying and pasting. So probably didn't want to type it all in. Write an AFC available spectrum inquiry request for global operating class 131 at the center of Dallas, Texas for device ID, and there's an ID number. So this is going to come back. Every time I've done this, there's been slight differences. We'll see what it comes back with this time, but it formats and provides a JSON output file that you could use to submit to an AFC if you have access to this level of detail to an AFC provider. So as you can see, it put the FCC ID in that ID column, and it went out and looked and found the center of Dallas is 32.7 and change, 96.8 and change, or whatever, and it throws in a major axis, minor axis, all the details, and you should be able to get a response with this. I have tested this in the past, and it works very well. There are other methods in there that you may want to try out, including doing, you could specify what radius you want, or what major minor axis you want, what height to use, and different global operating classes, or even inquired frequency ranges instead of the global operating classes. So those are pretty, it seems to be working pretty well. So I like this from an engineer's standpoint, because I can ask it how to do this, and I don't have to do a lot of typing and validation of the format. So that is the last question that I had in the queue. I believe we're moving on to questions and answers among the entire group.
Yeah, before we go on to questions and answers, I was going to go ahead and talk a little bit about where we'll go with this moving forward, and then we'll take your questions and answers as we go. As you know, you've seen today, we have two of our major specifications outlined in the NotebookLM today. We will continue to refine the utility, take feedback as you provided, and make changes that we can. We will continue to evaluate how the operations work going forward. And as new standards come along, and as new rules come along, if there's things that need to be updated, as soon as it's validated by the forum and approved, it will be included in the NotebookLM and then updated for your perusal and queries. We try and keep that as close to the timing as possible, and make sure that all of the documents that make sense for your inquiries are included. We will be extending this to other communities, such as the software-defined systems materials and other committees as they become available. We believe this is a very useful tool for those who follow WINForum standards. And of course, we are seeking your feedback as much as possible to make this as useful to you as possible. Andy, did you have other comments?
No, that was it. I think we are ready. I mean, we've done some questions during the course of some good questions during the course of the webinar, but if anybody has any other questions they would like to ask, or if they'd like to, to publicly try out a query on either of the notebooks, let us know. You can also go to the notebook links directly and try them out yourself. But yeah, we're open for any other questions. So we did get a question that says, I'm not familiar with CBRS standards, but the 3GPP standards have many equations. Can the notebook you have handle equations? I can say absolutely yes. I had to write some code a couple of months ago that included implementing the WINForum recommended antenna pattern for CBSDs, and it handled that perfectly. I said, please generate a function that will interpret the WINForum standard antenna pattern for CBSDs, and it came back perfectly. So yes, it will understand equations.
One thing I will comment about standards is that standards provide uniformity in the ecosystem. They provide transparency. They do provide equations and information on technology, and they provide a convention that can allow different uses to be used within the same use, and it correlates to the regulations that are out there. So any of the information that would be contained in those documents is verifiable inside the query. Andy, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Another thing I might point out, and Pete alluded to it. So we have experimented with asking the same question multiple times. And what we find is that the answer is correct each time, but the the way it phrases it or the order of materials may slightly different. Like, you know, when we did the live demo and Richard asked about whether you have to use a CPI to install CBSDs, it's funny, all of the other times we've queried it, it gives the requirements for category A first and then category B. And then I noticed today, for the first time, it gave the requirements for category B first and then category A. So it's those kinds of differences, but we haven't noticed that, you know, you get a wrong answer 1 out of every 5 times you ask or something like that. We haven't seen that. We've seen it gives the right answer each time so far, but the phrasing or order may be slightly different.
Yeah, to expand on that, I was remarking that some of the questions about how to get your device approved or the AFC order, sometimes it would merge the lab testing and public trial into one step, and this time it actually broke it out into separate steps. So I find it kind of interesting that it does kind of make it different every time.
We did get another question that somebody, I think, tuned in right when we were discussing the 3GPP standards. Yeah, we're talking about that because we'd asked if anybody knew of any other wireless standards groups that were using AI to be able to query their standards. We did get a response that indicated that NYU Wireless had experimented with using AI to query the 3GPP standards. There wasn't, you know, we don't know what the results of that were. And I had I've actually personally used that. I had some questions about power limitations for 3GPP under certain conditions, and I uploaded some of the physical standards from 3GPP into my own notebook and queried and got what I believe to be the right answer. I'm not an expert in 3GPP standards, but it came up with an answer that seemed to be consistent with what the reference said. And so it sounds like, you know, to us, 3GPP standards would be really good thing to incorporate in a notebook. Of course, 3GPP or somebody would have to do that. That's not something WInnForum is going to do because those aren't WInnForum standards. But, you know, we see this technology being really, really good and very useful for interpreting standards, because those of you who've dealt with standards know how much material you have to read through to make sure you caught all of the different caveats to get an answer to a specific question. And, you know, this is exactly what this notebook is great at, because it goes across all of the documentation before it gives an answer. So it saves you a lot of time from reading every document and you know, catching every nuance of a response. So another question, are there any plans to publish more machine-friendly versions of the standards? For example, Markdown, XML, JSON, et cetera, to make it easier for others to create similar type applications. So it's funny you should ask. So the use of NotebookLM came out of the AI work group's charge to find a way to make our standards more AI friendly, to be able to query using AI. And we started down the path of examining exactly what the question alluded to. Like, if the standards were published in a markdown format, like LaTeX, or were published in a way that uses XML or JSON or some other structured language, that we thought that's the magic to making our standards more AI understandable, and that when Gemini or others, you know, perused our website and downloaded our standards, it'd be more likely to give a correct answer because it would be better able to understand it. But then we came across NotebookLM and we gave it a try, and we found that it gave us everything we were looking for in terms of being able to query it and get a correct answer from our standards. So we've decided to go down that path. We've sort of put on hold the concept of publishing WInnForum standards in other formats that make it easier for machine learning or easier to ingest in other applications. Not to say that we'll never do that, but we found this was so powerful that we just decided to go down this path. So short answer to their question is, it's not impossible that we will look at doing standards, maybe companion standards in additional formats that are more machine learning or machine readable. But at the moment, we've put that aside, and we're putting our eggs into the to the notebook basket.
All right, Andy, I think that's all the questions we have for today.
Yep, that was it. Stephanie, I presume nothing else. So, so yeah, please give it a try. Please provide feedback. And again, you know, if you have specific contacts of people who have worked with AI queries for standards, wireless or otherwise, we would love to hear about it, because we'd love to collaborate with other standards groups to do that. Yeah, there was a comment that wish the SAS and AFC providers would also look into creating a tool for understanding their respective spectrum usage. I'm with you there. That would be great if the you know, if the MNOs would do the same to make it easier to you know, to query spectrum use in the 1200 megahertz of spectrum that that they use as well. But yeah, there's limitations. There's actually FCC rules that prohibit providing information about specific CBSD deployments and things like that. So there are some regulatory hurdles to doing some of that. But yeah, I hear you. I'm all for transparency and data, and it would be really useful to have some of that you know, built into a utility like this.
One of the things you might want to also consider is that the on the 6 gigahertz side, we have just approved a specification for collecting 6 gigahertz metrics. So we'll at least be able to understand very soon what the deployment density is in the United States in various areas, so that we can get an understanding of like how successful is the standard power around the country. So it's not necessarily what the spectrum usage is. On the AFC side, the AFCs just issue what channels could be available, not what is actually registered and what specific channels they're using. But it does give an idea of the density of deployments across everything. It is more of a voluntary specification, so not every AFC provider may provide their data, but as long as we get a majority of those AFC providers, it'll give us at least sort of a look into that.
Yep. Which reminds me, we need to add that document to the 6 gigahertz notebook, because it was just published last week. So we will add that to the 6 gigahertz notebook.
Yes, and I believe that it just was added like yesterday to the list of the standards.
Yep.
For 6 gigahertz.
Good. Okay. How about PAL assignment lookups? We're considering that. That's part of, so the ability to say, hey, I'm in this county, who owns which PAL channels in this county or whatever. We're looking at that. Again, that's not a WINForum publication. That actually was done between the SAS administrators and the PAL holders. So we are having at the board of directors soon, we are having a discussion about our policy with regard to adding non-WINForum material to the notebooks. There is a lot of additional material that could be useful, but again, it's not something that those materials aren't something that WINForum is responsible for or has control over. So we have to be a little careful. But you know, hopefully we'll come up with some policy that will allow us to add those types of things in here. So we will, I think we're just about done, and I don't see any other question coming in. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining. We really hope you guys use it, provide feedback, and we'd like to continue to make these more useful and expand their use. And you know, I should say anybody with even a free Google account can create their own notebooks. And you know, I found the notebook utility incredibly useful. So one of the things I do is during FCC proceedings, I upload all of the comments that are filed into my own notebook in a particular proceeding, and you can question away. You know, what's the most common issue identified in the comments, and it'll come up and do that. Or you know, can you summarize the comments by sector and things like that. It's incredibly useful, incredibly powerful utility. So, you know, you can't, not just for WinForum, but you can create your own notebooks. I think if you use a free account, you're limited to 50 documents in the notebook, but you can cheat. You can combine documents into, you know, single PDF files and treat that as one. You know, there's various ways to get around that, but yeah, it's very, very useful. So we hope you'll use the WinForum CBRS and 6 GHz notebooks, but also keep in mind you can create your own for other purposes. So very useful.
Thanks
So thanks,
everybody for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thanks.